friends, welcome back to Guess What? Compliance can be simple. I'm your host, Dr. Natasha Guess, founder of Guess Compliance Consultant LLC, where I work specifically with small and mid-sized healthcare practices to build compliance systems that actually function in real operational environments. Now, today, we're talking about one of the most common misconceptions I encounter in my work with healthcare practices. And that's the idea that compliance is something you build and then you're done. Now, I understand why this framing is appealing. Building a compliance program feels like a project. You identify what you need, you create the policies, you conduct the risk assessment, you then train your staff, sign those agreements, you check all of the boxes, and when it is done, it feels like it is done. But compliance is not a project. It is a living system. And a living system that stops being maintained does not stay in place. It deteriorates. Let me walk you through why that is true in practice. Organizations all evolve. That is the nature of growth. As an healthcare organization or a practice scales, it adds services, it expands its care model, it brings on new staff, and introduces new technologies, as well as establishing new vendor agreements. Each of those changes brings new compliance responsibilities. And a compliance program or operation built for the organization as it existed 18 months ago may not address the compliance requirements of the practice or organization as it exists today. That is not a hypothetical. For instance, you may have a telehealth expansion that introduces new considerations around data transmission, around consent, and around cross-state regulatory requirements. You may have a new billing arrangement that may change the scope of a business associate agreement, or a merger or acquisition that introduces an entirely new compliance footprint. Each of those developments requires the compliance program to adapt. Now, if you look at it, staff roles are always changing. When a staff member takes on new responsibilities, their compliance training needs to reflect those responsibilities. When someone leaves your organization or practice and the role is absorbed by a colleague, the compliance obligations attached to that role transfer as well. And a compliance program that does not update training when roles change leaves staff making compliance decisions they were never trained for. And I've said this before. Your vendors change, your services expand, your ownership transfers. Data handling practices, they do evolve. Your business associate agreements that accurately describe one of your vendor relationship at the time of sign-in may be significantly out of date within 2 years. And an outdated BAA is not a protection for you or your organization. It's a documented gap between what was agreed to and what is actually happening today. Systems change as well. When a new electronic health record system is implemented or a new communication platform is adopted, when a new device management solution is deployed, the policies and training that govern how staff interact with PHI through those systems, they need to be updated. And a policy referencing a system that no longer exists is evidence of inactivity. Your organization's inactivity. It is not compliance. So now that we've talked about that, I know many of you are asking, so What does a functioning compliance program that actually adapts to look like? I can tell you that. It has a maintenance structure built into how the organization operates. It's not as a separate function that gets addressed once a year. It is a scheduled, embedded part of operations. Then you turn to your risk assessments. Those need to be on a defined schedule, at minimum annually, and triggered by significant organizational changes. Your policy reviews, they must be tied to operational changes, not just a calendar. When a new system is implemented, when you add a new service line, the relevant policies must get reviewed and updated. Vendor agreement reviews at contract renewal and when the scope of the relationship changes must be done materially. Your training updates must be done when workflow changes, not just annually. If the workflow changes, the training changes. And you have to document all of it. And this is not because regulators are watching every update. It's because the documentation of an active, maintained compliance program is exactly the pattern evidence that makes an organization or practice defensible. Now, let me tell you what a functioning compliance operation or program actually delivers. Because this is the conversation I most enjoy having with practice managers, practice owners, and CEOs. And we know they've invested in building their systems correctly, so I enjoy these conversations. Audit readiness. When a regulator or a payer or OCR walks into your practice or organization, the organization should not be scrambling. Your documentation should be correct and current. Your policies have to reflect actual workflows. Your training records must be complete. And then your organization or practice can produce what it's asked for without a crisis. Another thing is staff competence. Your team should know what to do in a compliance sensitive situation. They should know who to notify when something unexpected happens. They should know the escalation pathway, and they should have the confidence that reduces hesitation, which creates exposure. Another thing you should have is reduce disruption. When something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong, the response is structured and documented rather than improvised. Your organizations must spend less time in reactive crisis and more time on the work it is actually there to do. Another thing is regulatory defensibility. When regulators evaluate your organization or practice, they should find evidence of ongoing oversight, patterns of consistent activity, documentation that tells a coherent story about a compliance operation that is actively maintained. That is the standard. And it's reachable. Here's what I want you to take away from this episode. A compliance operation or program that does not adapt is not a compliance program. It is a compliance artifact, something that existed at a point in time and no longer reflects the organization or practice's actual operations. Building the system is just the beginning. Maintaining it is the work. Now, if you need a strong foundation, you need to rebuild everything, and you want to start closing those gaps today, I have two resources in the show notes. My book, The Compliance Trap: How Not to Get Fined, Sued, or Shut Down, is now available on Kindle, and it was written specifically for practice owners navigating exactly what we discussed today. And also, I have the Guesswork Ends Here HIPAA Compliance Template Kit. It gives you the templates and a 30-day roadmap to start building a defensible compliance foundation right now. Both links are in the show notes. In the next episode, we're going to get into the practical side of building and maintaining a compliance system in a lean team without a dedicated compliance department. We'll talk about 3 starting points: how to map compliance ownership to your existing structure, and why lean teams with tight systems are just as defensible as large organizations with dedicated compliance staff. I'm Dr. Natasha Guess. Thank you for listening to Guess What? Compliance Can Be Simple. You can also schedule a free compliance strategy call. The link will be in the show notes as well. I will see you in the next episode. Until then, keep it simple, stay compliant, and protect your patients.